Have you ever been stuck waiting for something important to happen, like a train or an online order? Time seems to go slower when we're waiting. It makes us want to fast forward. But what if there was a war that happened so fast that all you would have seen was the loading screen? Welcome to the Anglo-Zanzibar War. This conflict between Britain and Zanzibar may have been the fastest in history, but it packs a punch in its 38 minutes. We'll take you through the background of the fighting, why it kicked off, and the astonishingly short battle itself. Plus, how the war is remembered today. Make sure to stick around until the end, because we have a question for you about the Anglo-Zanzibar War that you can answer for a chance to win a prize. In the late 1800s, Zanzibar Island was a gem of the Indian Ocean. The island became known as the crown jewel of the East African coast thanks to its lucrative exports of cloves and other spices. It was also important for trading ivory and, yes, people too. Zanzibar was a slave trading center until the practice was outlawed by the British government in 1873. That didn't stop illegal slave trading completely, though, but we'll get back to that later. As valuable as Zanzibar was, no country wanted to rule it alone. Instead, 3 countries shared the responsibility: Portugal, Germany, and Great Britain. Although the Portuguese had been in the region first, their hold on the island diminished in the mid-19th century. Eventually, they sold their interest to Britain and Germany in 1886. Under the terms of the treaty, the British got most of the island and Germany got a smaller slice. Both powers agreed not to expand beyond their slices without the other's permission. But there was another complication. While nominally independent, the Sultan of Zanzibar actually had to answer to the British. You see, the British consul in Zanzibar, Basil Cave, effectively controlled the island's foreign affairs. He did this under the watchful eye of Rear Admiral Harry Rawson of the Royal Navy, who made sure that the British had military superiority. This is important because the next Sultan of Zanzibar, Khalid bin Barghash, wouldn't take kindly to British interference in his affairs. In 1896, the current Sultan of Zanzibar, Sultan Hamad bin Thwani, died suddenly, while he had appointed his cousin Khalid as his heir. Khalid seized power before the official announcement of his succession. This move was a blatant disregard of the system that Cave had set up. Up until now, sultans were careful to stay on Britain's good side. They knew that without British protection, they might not remain sultan for very long. But Khalid was impatient, and he thought he had a claim to the throne regardless of what the British thought. To add fuel to the fire, the outgoing sultan had left an illegitimate son, a situation that many in Zanzibar believed made Khalid ineligible for the throne. Cave considered Khalid's actions a breach of the treaty between Britain and Zanzibar. If Khalid wasn't removed, the British would be setting a bad example for other rulers in the region. To make matters worse, Khalid didn't seem willing to bend. He fortified his palace with heavy guns and barricades. Now Cave had no choice but to bring him down. Cave drafted an ultimatum for Khalid that outlined 3 demands. First, Khalid had to recognize the new sultan. Second, he had to vacate the palace. Third, he had to leave Zanzibar. Khalid had 1 day to agree to these terms, or the British would use force. Unfortunately, Khalid would not budge, partly because he was confident that his own forces were stronger than those of the British, and partly because he didn't think the British would risk starting a war. On August 26, 1896, the Royal Navy positioned 5 warships around the harbor. The Raccoon, the Minotaur, the St. George, the Mersey, and the Dita. They were prepared to bombard the palace if necessary. The British ambassador waited out the last hours of the night on board the HMS Raccoon. He would play a crucial role in the events to come. At precisely 9 a.m. the following morning, the ships opened fire. The British bombarded the palace with over 600 rounds, unleashing the full force of the Royal Navy. From inside the palace, Khalid returned fire with 2 of his guns, but neither of them hit anything. The battle was over within minutes. By 9:40 a.m., both of the palace's main guns were destroyed, and its flag tower lay in ruins. Most of the defending soldiers were dead and the rest were running for cover. Khalid learned that the British were prepared to go to war over this, so he gave up and slipped away. He escaped through a secret passageway underneath the palace, ran to the German consulate, and surrendered himself to the Germans. The British commander, Rear Admiral Harry Rawson, had hoped to avoid bloodshed, but he had no choice but to act when Khalid defied his ultimatum. Nevertheless, he found the quick and decisive victory embarrassing. Rawson asked the Admiralty in London what he should do with Khalid. The response: send him to jail. However, the Germans protested, claiming that since Khalid had taken refuge at their consulate, he was protected by diplomatic immunity. This argument was backed by international law. Therefore, the British had no choice but to let him go. In the end, they made a deal with Khalid. He would give up any claims he had to the throne, and in return, the British would grant him a noble title and an annual stipend. For the rest of his life, Khalid was known as the Beggar Sultan. He spent his days living modestly in England and Scotland. He died in Edinburgh in 1916 and was buried in Woking in Surrey. The Sultanate of Zanzibar was firmly under British control again. However, the Anglo-Zanzibar War didn't put an end to the slave trade in Zanzibar. That wouldn't happen until 1926. That same year, the island would also become a British protectorate, and remain so until the independence of Tanzania in 1963. Today, Zanzibar is part of Tanzania and serves as a semi-autonomous archipelago. The Anglo-Zanzibar War is still famous for being the shortest war in recorded history, and the battle itself was notable for the gap in firepower between the two sides. But in some ways, it's easy to forget that the war was real. 500 Zanzibaris died, compared to only one British sailor who was slightly injured. It's hard to imagine a war today where the difference in casualties would be that extreme. But it's important to remember that the war wasn't just a battle between two militaries. It was also a fight between an empire and a small nation that was desperate to stay free. Even if it lasted only 38 minutes, it was an important moment in history. Now it's time for you to make history by answering a question about the Anglo-Zanzibar War. What did the British demand of Sultan Khalid in their ultimatum? You can write your answer in the comments below. Then don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an exciting episode. We'll pick our favorite answers and feature them in an upcoming episode. Thanks for watching.